So next up, our theme of this event is Horizons. We're now going to move on to a Horizon 1 showcase, something that we've talked about a bunch today. Now we're going to get into some nitty-gritty of, again, how we make it real, how we go from point automation, sticky plasters, to what we like to talk about, which is the autonomous enterprise. So I am delighted to introduce my colleague, Ralph Abujade Diaz. Ralph is a practice leader at HFS and also somewhat of a social media phenom. But Ralph, come on up. Please welcome Ralph, everyone.
Thank you. So we're back with the autonomous enterprise. Yeah, I think the title says it all. Yeah, everyone's trying to get there. I think it's been a bit of a cycle. Yeah, when they try to become autonomous, didn't work. Then there is a bit of cold period. Then some new hype comes, new emerging tech arrive, and then getting excited again. How are we going to get more autonomous? Yeah. So I think it's pretty much really this discussion is with enterprise leaders who are really there. Is it really so easy to get there? Where do we start? And we're going to get really an unfiltered opinion from the panel. So please, Shaili, if you want to join, Anand. So we'll let you introduce yourself in a bit, but you just have a seat. So we have Shaili from Anglo American, Divi from Helion, Mark from Hitachi, and Ali also, who is going to bring a lot of experience on process improvement, etc. So let's start maybe quick with the slide that Phil presented this morning. Yeah, we are really getting this dichotomy that we are really feeling now. This balance between really slow down, how enterprises are going to manage all these headwinds we all know about. I'm not going to repeat that. How actually they're going to be able to do more with their IT budget that is being squeezed. 67% say that they are squeezing their IT budget, different capacity. How are we going to get the talent we need? So retaining talent, hiring talent has been the two biggest challenges, internal challenges that our enterprise are highlighting that can potentially negatively impact their strategy, yeah? How to get the right people. At the same time, huge hurry. Everyone wants to be digital. I think they all started that mission of being completely digital. And also, obviously, everyone is trying really to make those, or trying to connect their front office to the back office, get the data right, get the process streamlined, and also the whole ecosystem, how to work better with our partners, customers. It's all about experiences. So there, we can clearly feel that there is a big hurry to get there, but at the same time, that slow down. And the two are right, yeah? It's not like one is predominant, but we feel that really now it's a moment now to really think about how enterprise can drive more autonomous processes. I'm not saying the enterprise become entirely autonomous, but ultimately how data can flow way faster without any impediments to get to the right person, take the right decision. But it's all about pretty much streamlining a lot of things. Some people talk about data, it's all about data. Some people talk about it's all about process reengineering. It's all about nice AI tech. It's all about automation. It's about a lot of things that I think we're going to probably clarify now. And then, I mean, the autonomous enterprise is, for us right now, it's really a mindset guided with principle. I think we are releasing soon a framework around what does it mean to move from human-led enterprise to a more automated, AI-guided, and the nirvana of being self-optimized. Yeah? I think we're not there yet, but we are trying to capture a lot of information from enterprise clients, service provider, tech vendor, and come up with a pragmatic framework, yeah? Which is not all about technology, but as Phil mentioned, about how to change hierarchies, how to change data, how to also evolve the governance and controls, because sometimes you go very fast at the process level, and all your good initiative is stopped by 1990s risk and control framework that doesn't allow you to do there. So I think it's a lot of areas that needs to go in the same direction. But ultimately, yeah, it's about, for us really, as Phil rightly said, ultimately, to summarize it, it's data is probably the strategy, automation, the discipline, and AI, the refinement, yeah? And it's all about combining in a very nice way all these three, but if I need really to summarize those 6 principles, that's pretty much how we think about an autonomous enterprise. And our latest pulse survey clearly is showing that enterprises are moving in that direction. They're embarking on large initiatives around improving automation. And I'm saying improving because clearly we've seen that automation didn't really work. Or the way it has been deployed, the way it has been embedded, hasn't pretty much brought all the return investment that was expected. So a lot of things now is about how to build resilient automation, scalable automation, and there are a lot of work going in that space, how to leverage better emerging tech. And you can imagine the spectrum of what we call emerging, from low code to better use of conversational AI, machine learning, everything that really can bring that extra power on top of your automation so that it becomes probably more intelligent, And last but not least, really is ultimately about responding to contextual changes in a timely manner. Understand your customer behavior change, and probably you need the right enabler to cascade this back into your back office via good automation, good data, and then it's a bit of a cycle, But these three, really these three trends are clearly pointing that enterprises are trying really to think strategically about these foundational elements, and maybe this is driving the autonomous enterprise or the mindset that we're looking for, but we have good indicators that clearly it's happening. And I'm just, I think, straight to the question. I think we've seen a lot of framework, a lot of good ideas, but I think many people are pragmatic, skeptical. A lot of people are very enthusiastic about that, and I think it's a very mixed feeling. And obviously, not organizations start at the same point. Digitally native organizations have the luxury to start fresh, versus good old organizations which have such a legacy that is not happening. And I'm going to start with the first question. I mean, Shaylee, if you could quickly introduce yourself. But really, first question, I mean, are we actually rapidly arriving to more and more enterprise becoming autonomous? Is it really that driver now that we are seeing, the third trigger that Phil mentioned?
Okay, so I'm Shelley Davis, and I do process excellence and automation. So look at processes and then how do we automate them, and have spent probably the last too many years largely around shared services. So I have a very schizophrenic view of an autonomous enterprise, and I think, Ralph, you hit the nail on the head for me. It's about a mindset. If you want to do it, you can do it. The capabilities are there. I'm currently working with Anglo American, and I look at the mine that's just gone into production there in Chile, completely autonomous, absolutely amazing. And then I look at our shared service center, and we've still got hundreds of people processing invoices. So I think it is about, and I think when you've got an organization that's been around for many, many years, it's sometimes easier to automate what you've already got, as opposed to saying, if I wanted to achieve that outcome, where would I start? So I think for me, it is doable. I think it's a mindset. It's also a capacity. Yeah. I think a lot of people in shared services, I know 20 odd years ago, we were saying, for me, lots of things that happen in a shared service center typically are a cost of failure. And yet we've still got hundreds and hundreds of people doing work that shouldn't really exist. So back to Mary's point, I think we're all right for a job for a while yet, but could it be different? Absolutely.
Perfect. And you, Divi, I know that you've seen a lot, part of large transformation. So what's your view, or really are our enterprise starting to have that mindset and moving towards these concepts?
Yep. So I'm Divi, so I'm the chief architect at Halion, right? We just spun off from GSK last year. So I think we don't have a choice anymore, right? It's the way the pandemic has happened, the way the inflation, the cost of living crisis, the IT budgets are going down. It's difficult to find the right talent. And then more and more organizations are thinking, how can we drive transformation end to end, right? Rather the silos. We touched upon the silos in the morning session, but it's more, if you have to do that enterprise-wide evaluation on automation, it needs to be end to end. And it's not a choice, because if you don't do that, then you're going to start falling behind your competitors, right? So it's more, how do we enable that? And the people who will not do that, they will fall behind. I think there was a reference of a zebra and a scooter, right? So if you don't do that, I think you're going to fall behind. Yep.
Perfect. And Mark, your view on that from a service provider helping client get there, how
Yeah, exactly. I'm Mark Stubbs. I run the Technology and Solutions Office for Hitachi Vantara for EMEA. So we get involved with a lot of clients, working through a lot of their problems, including automation, to help them kind of put end-to-end solutions together. So that's my background. I think, so when I was looking at this question, I think a number of things came to mind. One was, what's actually driving this change? There's a lot of change happening at the moment. I don't think it's stopped. If you kind of go back to 2008, I would probably say we've been in a continuous cycle of improvement ever since then, as soon as we hit the credit crunch. So I don't think anything's really stopped. I think what has probably happened over the last few years, though, is probably the big drive to cloud and data. Cloud and data has allowed people to do things that they wouldn't have been able to do previously. The amount of information they've got and how they can process that data has changed the story. The investment in this space has been huge. And I think what that's done is allowed a growth area which was simply untapped, and it's accelerating hugely. If you go back to Google Transformers, which was the original paper that was produced about 6 years ago, which is a precursor to ChatGPT, effectively evolved into it, that's 6 years' time from a paper to something which has been released over the last few weeks, and then Bard a couple of days ago has been released. I think that accelerated pace is just something that which I don't think anybody really expected. Certainly, if you look back 4 or 5 years to AI stories and the conversation that people were having, it was certainly not at this level. And it's kind of surprising the pace and rapid movement of this. So chatbots, etc., have obviously caught on. Those have been moving well. But the fact that we're now moving into generative AI, which is so aggressively taking over the market in terms of what it can do, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of challenges as well. It's still meaning that we're now at a point where we can actually start to use this, and we can use it to do things that we couldn't do previously or even think of doing previously. So I think we've kind of got to that point where this momentum is starting to get us to that cusp. Now, where it's going to go, we'll see. I think one of the other challenges which is kind of driving this push is if you start to look at revenue models of organizations, CapEx versus OpEx, there's a different kind of view of it. So now you're seeing a lot of companies that purchase CapEx because of the current inflation challenges, while holding on to their products. So they're sweating their assets a lot more. If you look at OpEx operating models, they're subscription based. They're getting more hit by the fact that we're in high inflation zones. So you're kind of seeing changes in the way that businesses operate, and they need to keep ahead. So it's probably no surprise that all of the major cloud vendors are investing so heavily in AI, because actually that's gaining a lot of traction. If you look at where Microsoft is going with ChatGPT integration into its products, it's phenomenally impressive. And they're driving towards automation within their entire product stack. So this is definitely happening. It's not going to slow down. And those companies that embrace it, the same way we've seen data-driven companies really kind of grow throughout the last 10 years, it will be the same around autonomous operations as well. Companies will need to embrace this. If they don't, then they're going to find that they're fast overtaken, they'll become too expensive, they're going to be bought out, they're going to be replaced. It's going to get pretty aggressive in that market space.
Ali, a view on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Ali Malik, I've been involved in setting up GBS centers, the entire life cycle for the past 15 or 16 years. Very interesting question, right? So are we rapidly arriving at a third major trigger that will lead the evolution of autonomous enterprises? I think that trigger was actually 2 years ago, like it or not. But when the pandemic happened and everything got shut down, that was the inflection point. And there are many businesses that took that as an opportunity, capitalized on it, and others for various valid reasons or reasons outside of their control, they couldn't. In this country, at least, we had the comeback of cutting-edge QR codes. Pretty simple, swept into oblivion, but all of a sudden, everyone had a paper printed out. You couldn't go anywhere. Many a times, you couldn't go and travel without that QR code. So from a front-end business point of view, that inflection point, that trigger, it happened. Interestingly, for enterprise backbones or GBS organizations or the service delivery partners, businesses, very rightly so, have started demanding and expecting more. If you're a provider, for instance, based out in India or elsewhere, sat on a wealth of data that you've accumulated over the past N number of years, the expectation is that, hey, give us the value, deliver something more. You just cannot be sat there. So from my industry, and if I were to say GBS and process, well, that being my industry, the expectation and the ask from businesses has increased exponentially. And without naming some providers and ITOs, there were some who went above and beyond in demonstrating resilience, in moving their operations in a matter of days before lockdown. So yes, that inflection point happened. For some companies, they might be lagging already, dare I say.
So I think you all agree that it's happening, yeah? There is no one doubting, yeah? No, it's great. And the next $1 million question, yeah? What is needed to get there? And we are obviously getting a lot of data from enterprise clients, service providers, and to be honest, we are trying to understand and make a logic around what is needed to get there, because some people say without the data, don't even start anything. Without the appropriate tech enabler, you cannot get the data out at the speed of light. Without, as Phil mentioned, the way you govern, the way you lead, the operating model needs to completely change. Leaders' mindset needs to change. So I think it's a bit of everything. But in your case, I mean, Shaylee, what do you feel is the big things to be able to start the journey, or at least get the right foundation?
Yeah, I think going back to what I said for the first question, it is having that mindset and getting everybody aligned to that's what you want to achieve, and you understand the reason for that. You can't get away from the fact that you've got to have decent data and be able to get at that data, and even if it's data to be used to enable you to have better conversations and understand where you want to go, that's absolutely vital. So I don't think you can get away from ignoring your data and not really understanding that. So I think there's plenty of capability out there. You know, it's always difficult to pick the right one, because the right one today probably isn't the right one tomorrow. But you can't keep swapping either. So I think there's plenty of capability. I think it's more down to the internal, the change mechanism with your people, all of those softer elements of it, as opposed to is available technology that would help you get there. Absolutely. I think it's all the other things that make that technology work for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that you come from a change management, large programs, but I think do you feel that change management play a central role really in ensuring this is going?
Absolutely, because you've got to take people on the journey with you, and not just do it to them. Otherwise, you know, there will always people that will hold you back from getting where you want to be. And it is easier to start with a blank piece of paper and say, okay, that's my objective, and start ground up, as opposed to changing something that you've already got.
And Divi, what's your view on?
So I think I agree with Shelley. I mean, it's something which you need to first have the mindset, right? But to add to that, I think it's also about how do we enable digital literacy or data literacy within the organization. So people need to be more aware of what's their data, what's the digital opportunities. And then it's also about how do we do a controlled democratization, right? So you can't say, I will drive all my automation initiative centrally, right? It's more, you lay the guardrails saying this is what are the guardrails and the standards. And then you allow the teams in the different regions or markets or domains to drive their own automation, but you need to have some standards so that it's consistent, right? So I think that's where I think most organizations, they either want to drive too centrally or just too federated, right? And it's a mixture of both. How do you get it right? It's also about you need to start thinking about the process view of the world, right? Not only about the technology view, right? So I know a lot of organizations are looking at S4 as an ERP thing, but they should not be looking at that just as a technology enablement. It's more, how do we can do the transformation, automation, using that as an opportunity, right? So this is more where you need to think, what's my business objective, what value I'm going to create, and then use technology and enabler to do that, right? And then think it end to end, right? So I think it's a mix of all of that. And I think one of the examples where it has really worked, I mean, I was reading about Zara. They use AI to look at in stores what people are looking and interested in, and then using that, they cut the production time from 3 weeks to 1 week. So again, we're finding those kind of things where people are really leveraging data very effectively. Yeah.
Perfect. And Mark, I know you mentioned cloud data, the importance of that. So do you see these are the key prerequisite to get that sorted and then you move forward? Or?
I mean, from a platform, yes. I think Shelley and Divya are absolutely right. You've got to have the right engagement at a senior level, otherwise it's not really going to go anywhere. All the best endeavours I know that have started at grassroots have typically not really survived because they don't get the right funding or exposure. I would say if you're going to kind of go down this path, without covering the strategic aspects again, I think one of the important things is to decide where you're going to start. A lot of companies, I've worked on lots of big change programs and they've all failed because people are trying to go too big. It just never really works. And I find I go and start with something small. Find something whereby you don't have to rebuild everything, but actually just insert something and that creates some automation. We were working with a mining company also, not but we were working at a mining company and we were looking at how we could improve some of their process controls. So we looked at their entire kind of flow and said, right, we'll go in and help you to automate this. But what we'll do is we won't go and replace anything because it's too expensive. Nobody's going to get funding for that. But what we'll do is we'll insert some small components and we'll actually aggregate data. We'll process it outside and then we'll push it back into your system. So we'll help your control systems. And that was something we did on the side. So it was a relatively low cost. But actually the ROI, I think it was less than 6 months. It was ridiculous. It was a really successful project. But it was small. And it was something which people had identified as a small area to get some good benefit. So I'd really focus on that small piece. I think cloud and data is definitely an area where you can the entry to market is so cheap and so low that you can play around with these things and not really worry about it. I would kind of just caution though the size of the projects you go after. Don't go too big. You might get the strategic desire, but just start small. And the second thing which I'll probably point out is culture. There's obviously a lot of anxiety in industry around the growth of AI and particularly autonomous operations, and people get a little bit nervous about it. So you have to take employees along with you. So if you're working in different regions, we're obviously global organizations now with different functions in different regions across the world, there's a lot of fear around where this may go. And that can get quite concerning. In fact, just this morning I was reading an article in The Guardian, which was written by the Screenwriters Guild. And the Screenwriters Guild are now looking at ChatGPT and getting quite nervous because they're thinking, hold on a minute, we used to write all these programs and now ChatGPT can do a relatively decent job of it. So where's this going to go? So it's very mixed because they're also looking at it as how do we get over writer's block? Well, ChatGPT may help us get over writer's block. So there's some great kind of use cases, but you'll see this kind of pandemic of fear almost around what is actually achievable versus what isn't achievable. So I think you've got to kind of get the cultural aspects absolutely spot on within a company. Otherwise, your resistance to any change will be huge.
Perfect. And Ali, you come from process excellence background. You're going to tell me you need to start with process probably, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the underlying foundation being data, as Shelley mentioned, Devi talked about, risk aversion, not starting with technology, but, addressing the problem, identifying it. And obviously, Mark talking about, being strategic, starting at a piece that is highly beneficial and growing it up. One point where I've seen some of my clients and in my experience that's worked well is having good partners, starting this journey with you and taking it through all the way, obviously process being at the core of it. So we're talking about not just ecosystem partnerships where you have a system integrator or a cloud platform provider. I'm also talking about taking the wider ecosystem community with you. I'm talking about the likes of external auditors who at times are roadblockers. Hey, we'll not sign an opinion, controls deficiencies. We're talking about regulators who are more concerned about data privacy, which is absolutely fine, but how does one manage to balance all of that and at the same time deliver with pace and progress towards an enterprise which is autonomous? So just examples, right? A chocolate manufacturer cannot do that alone. Someone or a company that's flying planes, they cannot do that alone. That's where ecosystem partners who specialize in this journey, they come in, use cases and co-invest, because everything has to be done where there is a business benefit or a business outcome. And when cash is strapped, with the backdrop, when there was a travel ban where pubs, restaurants, hospitality were shut, where do you get cash from? get your ecosystem partners to co-invest, get the tie-in for success focused on one point. And in this day and age, I think that's imperative. Without that, chances for success are minimal. And happy to be overruled, but ecosystem partnership, I think that should be a very core consideration of this.
And Divi, I know that we discussed around the enabling technologies, yeah? It's like the technology is here. The problem is that every big company have all the technologies in the world, ServiceNow, Appian, Pega, Power Automate, all the RPA tools, and they don't pretty much, manage to articulate that which technology is better for which use cases. So how large organizations are simplifying the tech landscape to be able really to drive this kind of initiative, because ultimately if it's all over the place, you can't really drive that consistency.
Yeah, so I think that's a challenge in probably most organizations, right? As we have started to look at different technologies and the benefits they bring, we have gone proliferation of that technologies, right? And because I think there's a lot of silos within the organization, everybody goes and buys their own technology, which probably could do the same things, right? And there's no end-to-end view of what's really required, right? So I think that's where I think, as I mentioned in the previous point about end-to-end process mapping, because you need to understand where is the opportunity across that and find out the hotspots. And you also need to drive a overall capability to the technology mapping, saying for this capability, this is my standard. But if there are niche areas, I might go a second option and the standards for that, right? Otherwise, there's a risk that you're going to have much more total cost of ownership, a lot of technical debt, and you still not get the right business outcome, right? So this, I think simplification is a big agenda, and I agree with Ali. I think there's a role for partners to play, but nobody has cracked it fully, right? So I think that's where I think still an evolving market, right? And we'll see how it comes up, right? Yeah.
Perfect. It's a perfect opening for my next question. What role will business and IT partner providers have to play, and I think more importantly, how they need to change the way they help organizations move from a pure transactional mindset into a outcome-based mindset together in the journey, because clearly they are trying to help organizations get there. Maybe the organization still doesn't receive that information properly, and I think there is a bit of I would say, mixed messages from both sides, But how really do you get them? Is it one by one, going strategic partners, very restricted list, invest in them, or trying to get as much partners as you want, as you need? How do you feel that they should be positioned and help?
So I think from a partner perspective, right, it's again first focus on the business outcome, right? What's the business outcome we're targeting, right? And I think there's a role for some of the internal capabilities, right? So I see, I mean, not because I sit in the enterprise architect, I see that being a key enabler for most of the organizations, because they have the end-to-end view of what's happening across technology landscape and business architecture across the enterprise, right? And then I think it's working with those EA function, working with the partners, saying where is the value, and then working with the business stakeholders, right, where we can leverage them. But there's still a lot of, again, there are going to be areas where you want to do specific targeted partners. But if you're looking at something holistically, like in automation, enterprise automation, you do need to have a strategy which is holistic end-to-end with some standards and guardrails. And then you let controlled democratization, which is more, you lay out, it's like town planning, right? You lay out standards for what needs to be done across for town planning, but then you let individual teams and domains to build using those standards what's required, right? So I think that's how it's going to be. Yeah.
And Shelley, your view on that? You've probably worked with hundreds of service providers.
Yeah, I think.
Are they really bringing this kind of innovation to you and proving that it works, or is just in the proposal and then disappear when they are in there? Because a lot of hype, but then they don't really deliver. Or are they delivering maybe?
I think one of the challenges is, having been on both sides of the fence, is when you look at value streams, they're very often broken in organizations. So you never really get the opportunity to, everybody talks about looking truly end to end, but not many people get the opportunity to do that. So then you end up taking a chunk out of the value chain. And by definition, you end up, so one that's been around forever, you know, procure to pay. Half of that sits in procurement and half of that sits in finance. And with the exception of IBM now, I think, where it all reports to the CPO. But that's a problem in every single organisation I've ever worked with. And you think, why, you know, something as simple as that, if we struggle to fix that, then, you know, I don't think it's because they're unable to. I think it's because organisations don't give them enough scope to really make that massive difference. So.
Mark, on the spot, your service provider. How are you helping your clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think everything I've heard is spot on. We have broken processes, but I think one of the things we'll probably take away is you don't learn to drive by jumping in a car and hitting the gas. You get lessons, people take you through it, and it's not because you don't have the ability, it's because actually you do need those guide rails. Bringing service partners in allows, well, one, the partnership to be created, but secondly, it allows you to augment your organisation with the skill sets that you need to be able to be successful, whether that's technology, whether that's process, whatever it looks like, you can bring those experts in to help you. Most companies at the moment are operating pretty lean, so if you're going to go through some kind of change program, you don't have oodles of people hanging around who can help on this, so you need to bring in partners who are going to help you to grow in that space. I would completely agree with the enterprise architecture view of the world, though. You've got to have that mission, you've got to get a strategy which is clear. We're working with an organisation at the moment where we're augmenting their architecture team with a couple of people who are technology specialists to work with them in defining the long strategy, and then we're working on how we can bring automation into their cloud operations as well. So that's an example of how you can inject a partnership into an organisation so that you don't get people who are running away with your strategy and direction, but actually working in harmony with you. So choosing the right providers is going to be absolutely key, and it will definitely accelerate because it gives you capacity to grow and it gives you the skills to make sure you do that more successfully with less risk.
Ali, I mean, I know you mentioned something like you expect your service provider to use the data they generate to give you way more insights. Yeah, I mean, is it really happening, or are they really doing that, or still processing transactions?
So I do have the benefit of being on both sides, as Shelley has been. So many a times, yes, because to win in today's marketplace, if you don't add value, you just cannot lean on that annuity business model, right? So you'd be very politely shown the door. Yes, there are certain tech/BPO companies who are more tech than BPO, and that's where the value comes in for the business. One point that I may add, just to bolster the entire case that we've actually unanimously sort of built up on, yes, have the ERP strategy, have your entire markers and principles within the organization, append that with strong governance. Why? Because you have a multi-partner strategy for a service. Many times, and I'm sure we don't need to have a show of hands here, many times I'm sure when you're on your review calls and review forums, you see SLAs which are all green, 99.9%, 99.5%, but internally, your own customers within the organization, they've got headaches, service degradation, right? So if both your service partners are on green, 99.9%, so where is that red, where is that blip? And this, again, in my experience with a few clients, that can only be ironed out if you have strong governance and some clauses, some triggers within the service contract that can, like, really put your provider, your partner on their toes should need be. Obviously, putting them on toes and bringing in value with data analysis, some go-to markets on, specific snacks within a geography. So that's all that I can say for the moment.
Perfect, and we're just on time. I was just looking at the seconds. No, thank you a lot for your very unfiltered input. Yeah, I think not everything is rosy and easy to get there. I can feel that it's not easy to get there, but clearly there is the leadership willingness. Yeah, more and more the enabling tech that are here now, and definitely it's how to puzzle, make all the pieces and bring them together. Yeah, but there is not like magic solution for sure. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, Shelley.